Senator Flake.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And, appreciate the testimony so far. I share the concerns that Senator Cardin raised with regard to OCO and the shift. This is something that all of us have been concerned, the chairman and others, over the years. The shift from baseline funding to OCO funding is just not an honest way to budget. And I'm not blaming the administration any more than I'm blaming Congress here, but we've got to get away from it. Let me talk a little about the trip that Senator Cardin mentioned that he and I and Senator Coons from this committee and 2 other members of Congress took to Southern Africa, mostly to look at wildlife trafficking and poaching and to provide some oversight for some of the programs that our government has with the various governments there. It's a challenge. We have seen a decline in the elephant population in Africa over the past 10 years of about 40 to 50%. Rhinos are being poached at just one park, Kruger, in South Africa, to the tune of about 1,200 just last year. When we were in Namibia, we went into a vault where they held illegal seizures of rhino horn and ivory. And I held one horn, well, 2 horns from one white rhino that on the black market was worth about $600,000. One set of rhino horns. It goes for about $60,000 a K, more expensive than any precious metal or anything else, or cocaine or drugs. And those countries are very worried that criminal networks will come in that will fund conflicts and instability like they have in Central Africa and elsewhere. So I would just say that the programs that we have going in those countries to help these countries actually respond to this threat are important, and we ought to keep going with that. Also, Senator Cardin mentioned the issue of trafficking in people, or TIP, the report that we have. Senator Cardin raised that just about everywhere we went. That is an important lever that we have to induce these governments to help more on this in this area. But it is concerning in some areas. In Namibia, when it was raised, the government responded, hey, we've tried to respond. After we left, there were newspaper articles expressing some confusion about where they were and where they are. And it's not just the Namibian government. Some of the other governments have expressed some confusion about how they respond. When you look at what we're trying to induce these governments to do, one of the things is the government of the country should make a serious and sustained effort to eliminate severe forms of trafficking in persons. Those items are maybe a little too subjective, and if we want to use this as an effective lever to push these countries more where we want them to be, I would suggest that maybe we need to work on some of these measures to make them more concrete and precise. Do you have any thoughts in that? I know this is an area that's of concern to you, and you've been working with these governments.
Well, thank you, Senator. I know this is not on everybody's mind, obviously, but I'll tell you it should be. And I wish it were something that we were able to do more about, and we should be able to. These same criminal networks that engage in the wildlife trafficking also, by the way, engage in trafficking in human persons, in narcotics trafficking. It's a multi-billion-dollar criminal enterprise. And it is destroying the future for lots of countries that could rely on ecotourism or other things. But it's also it's eliminating species from the planet. I think there's one rhino. I saw the other day, I think there's one white rhino in one country left. That's all. When I was in Kenya recently, I visited the David Sheldrick preserve there, where there were a bunch of orphan baby elephants because the parents had been killed. And the poaching has been reduced significantly because they now have wardens out there, armed. And there's a price you pay if you're caught. That's the only way. I mean, it has to be stopped by enforcement. You cannot have impunity in the system. And when it's part of a criminal enterprise in what has become a klepto country of one kind or another, it's extremely hard to do anything about this. So we need to galvanize countries together, and we need to put, unfortunately, this also is one of those things that takes resources. You've got to be able to provide the shelter, the refuge. You've got to be able to provide the enforcement mechanism, train people, make sure that there's no impunity with respect to this. And until this moment, there hasn't been a significant enough effort. Now, I know you and Senator Coons are contemplating legislation on this. We'd welcome talking to you about it. The one concern that we have is, it goes back to what I was talking about earlier, we're cooperating now with a lot of countries, and they're cooperating with us. And if we get into, we're worried about the prospect that if there's sort of a frontal assault on them, we may lose the cooperation rather than be able to make the progress we're making. It's something we should talk about. So what's the best way to get the return on investment here?
Well, thank you. Let me just, the last question. I just want to commend the administration for what they've done on Cuba, as was mentioned before. I have said to the President and others that there are still obviously big concerns with the Cuban government in the area of human rights, for example. But it shouldn't be lost on anyone. The improvement in the conditions of Cuban people since many changes have been made. For example, a few years ago when the President lifted restrictions on Cuban-American travel and lifted caps on remittances, that in combination with some changes made in Cuba have meant that nearly 25% of the Cuban workforce is now outside of government, whether they're running private hotels or Airbnb with a bed and breakfast, a private auto repair shop or a beauty salon. And these people who have that ability now are separate, as much as you can be in Cuba, from government, and are enjoying richer, fuller, more free lives than they would have otherwise. We still have a long way to go, but we're moving in the right direction. And I commend the administration for the steps that have been taken, and I wish the President well on his visit there. I think it's an important step.
Thank you very much, Senator. Appreciate it. We appreciate your support.